adventure in Pipeman on W4CY Radio.
This is the Pipeman here on the Adventures of Pipeman W4CY Radio, and I'm here with our next guest who has some killer new music, and what a long history, and I love that. So let's welcome to the show Eric from Aittala.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Did I do it right?
Yeah, you pronounce it right. It's Aittala. I know it is difficult. It's Finnish, and so people in America really don't get it. But when I'm in Europe, people pronounce it correctly because I guess they just see the letters differently when they're they're speaking English, right, as a second language. They get it right.
There you go. So I want to start off from the very beginning. So you started this thing way back in the previous century.
Yes.
And you're American, but you started it in the Netherlands, one of my favorite places in the world, by the way. And so how did that come about that an American would start a band in the Netherlands?
Well, because I was in the military a long, long time ago, and I was stationed in the Netherlands. So that's that's why I was there.
Well, thank you for your service.
Well, I appreciate that. That was like 30 years ago.
Yeah, my son's been in the Army for almost 20. He's like a half a year away from retirement.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And he never went to the Netherlands. I'm going to have to tell him, like, hey, idiot, why are you going to Somalia when you could have been stationed in the Netherlands?
There wasn't a lot of Army facilities in the Netherlands. There were in Germany, though, so I'm surprised in 20 years he usually
did.
Oh, he did go to Germany.
Yeah, he was stationed there for 3 years. And my daughter, her ex-husband, when they were married, they were in Germany for 3 years too. That's like that's the place everybody's got to go. But he went to Germany, Iraq, Kuwait, South Korea twice, Somalia a couple times because he's PSYOP. So they dropped him out of a plane and said, "We'll see you in 6 months, and if you get caught, we don't know you."
Good luck. Well, luckily, I mean, I was only in for 5 years, and I was stationed in Japan before that, so I had kind of a cushy, sweet assignments. Plus, I was in the Air Force, and if people know or don't know, they call it the Chair Force. Not quite real military, but it gets the job done. I mean, I was happy to be in the military. I had a good time.
Hey, listen, if I always said when I was younger, if I joined the military, it'd be the Air Force because I don't know, it just seemed cool.
Yeah. It is a little easier. You're not sleeping in tents for the most part in the middle of the desert.
Right.
They're air conditioned.
Hey, that shocks me right there. You know? So do you think being in the Netherlands is what kind of created your sound? You know, it's a different vibe over there.
Well, I would say, the songs, the original incarnation of the band was playing were actually songs that I started writing in Japan. So I can't say it influenced anything in particular, just because the basis of the songs we started playing were written before I got there. Right. So the idea, we were forming a band. Originally, it was going to be like a cover band. And then so it was an American singer. I wasn't the singer at the time. So it was an American singer. And then we had, his wife was in the military, so he was over there. And then we were trying to, form a band. And initially we were going to do a cover band, just to play out. And then I was writing originals. So we were like, well, let's just learn some of my originals as kind of a starting point. And then it kind of just rolled from there. And then we were looking for a band name, and we came up, any band, even I feel sorry for bands that have to name a band today, but even back then, trying to find a band name was impossible. And one of them was Morbid Curiosity, somebody came up with, and we were like, it sounds cool, but that sounds more death metal. So the singer just said, hey, it wasn't my idea, right? I didn't want to call it Aittala, but the singer was like, well, let's use Aittala. You're writing the songs. And, nobody else has that name. And so we just kind of went with that. And so that was the original incarnation. I was around about a year and a half, then I got out of the military. And then my idea was, or my hope was, oh, I'm going to go back to the States or get back to the States and I'm going to reform another version of the band. And that never really happened until 2008. So,
wow.
But I was always writing songs in the background, and I was always, with the intent of recording them someday. But my goal really at that time was to get into a band that was more of like a Kiss, meaning you had multiple singers, so you could be a little more kind of dynamic in what you're doing, or, even like a Night Ranger where we have two guys singing lead, and those bands that were more versatile. That I looked at it back then. I always wanted to be in a band with two guitar players and a keyboard player and a bass player and a drummer. But after I moved to North Carolina in 2000, I was in a few bands, and some of them were cool, but they had the same thing. I would join another band that was already that existed, and then we play, practice, and by the time it was time to write and record, the band would implode. And I just got kind of tired of that after 3 times, I think, that I was in those situations. And I said, I'm just going to focus on my stuff and, just have my resurrect Aittala again. And so we've been kind of steady since 2008.
Nice. And it's funny, we were talking about my son because he's home base has been Fort Bragg for his whole career. So he's in Vietnam.
Right, I'm about an hour away, so I've played in Fayetteville many times. Right, that's part of our music scene in this area is Fayetteville.
I would imagine so. Hey, did you know? Okay, because I do coverage at a whole bunch of festivals, but at all the Danny Wimmer festivals, there's a band that plays that is a constant, changing of the guard, so to speak. But it's an army band. That's a job in the army. I told my son, "You're a schmuck. You took this job. You could have had a band, man."
Right. Every branch has a band like that. Because I remember, long story short, is when I was in the Air Force, I had one job and I didn't like it, so I kind of failed out of the school on purpose. But I was looking at the job choices, and they actually had a job that was lighting and sound for the Air Force band. But what they do is they just have this thing called MWR. You might be familiar. It's morale, welfare, and recreation. And so they have sort of this thing where MWR will put on these shows, and sometimes the military bands will travel around. Sometimes you can do it as a temporary duty, meaning they'll take you out of your regular job. And then I knew a woman who was a really good singer, and they took her out of her regular job because she sang so well, just so she could tour the different military bases. But then you have kind of the main musicians, and you'll see that like when you watch a football game or something, they have the guys in the military, playing the regular, what we think is marching band stuff, but they also have a rock band, ironically. So where they'll play more modern music or more, kind of rock based stuff. So people who are lucky, who are really good musicians, it's, if you like being a musician and like serving your country and getting a decent paycheck, it's not the greatest, but that is a way to do it.
Yeah. This band, they play at all the Danny Wimmer festivals, which are basically metal and hard rock festivals. And I'm like, man, if I knew they had that way back when, I would have joined the army.
Well, you definitely got to be a real good musician, like sight reading, and even if you're just playing, well, maybe for metal or something, or more rock based, they'll take a little lesser educated musician. But I kind of had an interest in the Air Force band, but I wasn't quite the virtuoso. I couldn't read and write music or things like that. So I'm just a dumb metal guitar player. I tell people I play metal because I'm not good enough to play anything else. Because if you're a musician, basic rock stuff. I mean, it can get complex with scales and stuff, but most people who play metal guitar aren't probably good at any other type of music.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned scales, and when I was playing guitar as a teenager, I quit playing guitar because I was sick of having to practice scales. I'm like, just let me play, man. I don't want this shit's boring me.
Well, but those are the skills, that you develop to help you get to the place, right?
Right.
You probably let go too soon, right?
You're a dumb teenager. You want it tomorrow. You don't think of, oh, I may have to learn the basics first. I can't just get up and be Eddie Van Halen.
Right. Well, I'm surprised you didn't switch to bass, because that's what most frustrated guitar players do, is like, this stuff's too hard. I'll switch to bass because, that's even easier to play rock bass if you're playing generic 80s where you're just riding the A or the E and you're not really doing too much involved musically, unless you're like, a Geezer Butler, which don't seem to exist much anymore. Those types of really good musicians on bass.
Or I talk about a lot with people that are bassists, Paul McCartney, because he was a guitarist that had to play bass because there was already 3 of them playing guitar. So he
Right.
drew the short straw. And
he's a really good bass player, though. I mean,
Yeah.
there are people who can play bass. There are guitar players that play bass, or that you can tell, and then there are real bass players. So, I mean, and to toot my own horn, because I play a bass on a lot of the material. I don't mean to, but it seems like by the time we're going to record something, we don't have a bass player again for whatever reason. Bass players are the flakiest people, but I get a lot of compliments. They're like, "Wow, it's a really good bass line. Who wrote that bass line?" Because I try to do something complementary to the guitar and not just play the root note, which is sort of the Black Sabbath-y Geezer Butler kind of thing, where you're really carrying the song below the rhythm, but not just copying the rhythm.
Right. Totally. Well, and I have the utmost respect for people like you that will play both instruments, because, it is kind of difficult, I think, even in your head, like to switch zones from guitarist to bassist to whatever else you play. It's like a different mindset or different part of your brain, and you have to kind of switch it.
Well, especially people who can play guitar, piano, like who are virtuosos on several instruments, wind instruments, stringed instruments. It's like, to me, similarly, it's almost like speaking other languages. I've tried to learn other languages, and my brain doesn't function that way. I don't get it. Like I was pretty good at Japanese, but I had to think about it. Like there are some people, either they have the capacity or they were born, in 2 different cultures where they had to learn Spanish or French. And to me, it's amazing that they just you can just switch on and off. Like, to me, that would be like playing guitar and then going and play like clarinet. Like,
Right.
different things, but they're just brain just goes like, oh, I'm holding the clarinet now. Now I can play a clarinet. Or I think clarinet's this way. This is a flute.
and I played a bunch of instruments and sucked at all of them, probably because I didn't perfect any of them. So I was just messing up on all of them.
Right. No, I get it.
And, speaking of languages, I get what you're saying. Cause like I speak Spanish. I took 7 years of Spanish, but when I'm not using it, I'm not good at it. Like I go to Costa Rica a lot, and after I'm there for a while, then it starts coming back. But you have to think in the language you're speaking. And I think that's the same maybe with instruments too. Like if you're sitting there in your head and trying to translate everything from English to whatever language, you're not going to be fluent no matter what. You have to actually think in that language. And then you were in the Netherlands. To me, Dutch is one of the hardest languages. In fact, all the people I know there too, they're like, yeah, most Dutch people can't even speak it properly.
Right. Well, here's the thing about Holland, right? Or, the Netherlands, however you refer to it. Officially, it's the Netherlands. But I was lazy. I was a lazy American. But all Dutch people speak English. They learn 5 languages in school, right? Dutch because they're Dutch, English because they're next to the UK, German because they're next to Germany, Spanish because they go on vacation in Spain, and French because they're near France. And so, it's ingrained into their brain. And, in Japan, if you went off base, nobody spoke English. I mean, Japanese people rarely speak. You'll find anybody that'll speak a little bit of English, but in Holland, the Netherlands, anybody speaks English, especially younger people would be more fluent. And funny enough, I had a guy, he was the manager of the band when I was there, pseudo manager, but he spoke English so well. One time we were at a music store, and then he was speaking to me in English, and then he spoke to the guy in Dutch at the music store. And the guy at the music store thought he was an American who spoke Dutch. And he goes,
Wow.
"Oh, dummy, I'm Dutch." But he told me the way he learned English, this is kind of funny. The way he learned English is so fluently is from watching then the nuances of English, you know, and those little things like sarcasm people really have a problem with that aren't American or really learn English. Is he watched 90210 on
That's
Dutch
funny.
TV, and then he watched the Chuck Willery's Dating Game. So
Oh my God, that's so funny.
that's how he honed his English skills to be a perfect English speaker. Well, when he was
Wow.
speaking English, because if you spoke to him, you wouldn't know he was Dutch, right? He didn't have that accent.
Wow, that's amazing. And you know, it's funny that you mention that because a lot of Europeans I know, they watch a lot of English television so they can get better at English because our language is difficult because there's so many rules that don't like that you break, exceptions to the rule, you know, like
Right.
instead of the rule. So it's like I feel like if I didn't have that as my native language, I wouldn't understand most Americans, especially like you're talking about certain things like sarcasm. Like
Right.
you cannot explain sarcasm to somebody.
Right. Well, if you try to explain it, then they don't get it. Right. It's so nuanced and double entendre. We have so many double entendres, right? And it can be just inflection, using a word and how you inflect it changes the meaning totally.
Totally. So now in 2025, you have this new EP coming out,
Right.
Ill-Gotten Gains.
Right.
That's so descriptive of today, by the way. I love that title.
Well, thank you.
And so what's different now? What do you think has evolved for you as a songwriter, musician, band, etc.?
I mean, I would say over the years, initially, like when I was younger and was writing songs, I was more influenced. I was young, so and it was the late '80s. So the more Metallica-y thing, you know, everybody loved Metallica if you play guitar. And so I would say my songwriting was more influenced by Metallica, and I was more of a storyteller, kind of sometimes over bloated lyrics of a story. Like I would think of a story like a main character in my head. I would write a story around it. But then as I got older, as I'm getting older, and the songs would be super long too, right? You know, Metallica type things, 5, 6, 7 minutes. And now I understand being older, I sort of evolved from like early Metallica to Black Album Metallica. But, you know, I say that in more editing of the songs, shorter songs that get to the point faster, and less about storytelling, but more about themes. Like
Yeah.
the theme of the song is this, not necessarily here's the exact story, and a little more obscure with lyric writing and not so obvious. So I think that's how it's evolved. And it, you know, I would say the music was more regular heavy metal, so to speak. I don't know what to describe it, but now we're more, the Aittala sound is more doomy. A lot of people have called us eclectic doom, which I think is cool descriptor. So I kind of go with that. I mean, I just call it heavy metal, or metal, but people love to call like all the sub
Oh
genres
my
that they have
God.
out there.
It
It's
drives
ridiculous.
me nuts. It drives me so nuts that when I go on tour and I do coverage at these festivals, one of the things I do to be funny is during the interview, I'll have the band, if they were going to design their own genre for just their band, what would they call it? Because it is that ridiculous nowadays that there's so many sub and micro genres that Jesus, like every band has its own genre pretty much.
Right. Well, and I'd say I don't know if I've never heard any other band say they're eclectic doom. So,
See,
and
there you go.
that came from a guy that originally I heard it from a guy. We were doing some stuff in Europe, a little tour, and the tour manager, I was talking to him. He was just like, I think you guys are like eclectic. You're not quite doom, but it's doomy stuff. So I think eclectic doom. And he was a German guy. So I thought that was a good description. Then a couple other people over the years, I just ironically said it as well. And I said, okay, I like that eclectic doom kind of thing.
I do like that. That's a cool, like, if you're going to make a new genre name, I think that's a cool one. It just
But,
sounds cool. I think people, too, it leaves a little to the imagination where people are getting like, well, what would that be? Let me go listen to it.
right. And it's especially prevalent in our new single that's out now from Ill-Gotten Gains called Isolation.
Yes. Tell us about that too, because that name to me, now I might put a different meaning to it, which is what a great song would be. That has a shitload of meaning to me, that song.
Well, I mean, I don't really have some magical story other than I thought it sounded cool. Like I was just, again, I write more obscure now, and I hear phrases and I'll jot down phrases. And then when I start to put them together and sort of themes to create songs, I don't know where I heard it, but I heard Ill-Gotten Gains. I was like, I got to use that again. And so that just kind of evolved from there as, the title track is Ill-Gotten Gains. And, I don't really have a good story around it. I wish I was trying. My brain was kind of like, what can I create? Look, it just sounded cool. Like what are ill-gotten gains? Well, they're things that people acquire in nefarious ways.
Yep.
I
think ill-gotten gains and isolation just describes the last 5 years of our world.
Yeah, some of it is, again, thematically. No, that's not the right word. The themes are about those kinds of things, right? The carryover from COVID a little bit, but, basic stuff about, what's going on in the world, influenced by that, things you see on the news. I don't like to write direct things anymore. Like I said, I like to keep it kind of high level, and it leaves more the interpretation to the listener, to listen to the lyrics and say, well, this is what I got out of it. And, it's funny how quick story from a long time ago, I had a song and somebody found it on the internet, and we were talking. I don't even know how we got in contact, but she told me I was wrong because she said, oh, your song is about this. I can't remember the song. And I said, well, no. Well, I said, that's a great interpretation, but just so you know, the writing process, here's the story, what was in my head at the time. And then she said, no, you're wrong. I said,
wow.
Okay. I mean, you're telling the guy who, made the hot dog, I know what's in the hot dog, but if you taste different ingredients, that's fine. But to tell the guy who made the hot dog, his recipe,
I know, right?
Be used. I thought that was just kind of funny. I said, well, okay. I mean, you're a listener. You can have anything that you want be be the meaning of that song.
Yeah. And, I think that's where you're smart in your songwriting now, because I think the key to a good song is it has a specific meaning to you, but that doesn't mean it's the same meaning to other people. And when they put their own interpretation to it, they can kind of, they connect to the song, opposed to like this other story you're talking about, that person saying you're wrong. Well, first of all, yeah, you're right. What an idiot. Just to be blunt, how can you be wrong? You're the author. Okay. But, if that person took a different approach to it, like, oh, wow, I didn't think of it that way. I had this way of thinking. And then it's like, well, that's the way a good song should be. I interpret it as the listener the way I want, but that doesn't mean it discounts what the songwriter was actually meaning.
Exactly. And if you're good at writing songs, or if you're conscious about it, you write songs that are more timeless and not reference certain, whatever's current in vernacular at the time. And, I think that comes across better. I mean, I love some rap and hip hop, but, they'll always throw in certain references and you're like, oh, that's specific to this year. But if you write a good song, it's timeless and it doesn't lend itself to any time period. And a good example is the last EP. We had another EP out earlier this year in April called Machines. And that was all songs I had written in the 90s. It was like 4 songs. And I thought, okay, those are good songs. I want to put them out, but as a collection, which kind of shows the evolution of the songwriting. Because if you listen to Machines back to back with Ill-Gotten Gains when it comes out in November, you'll definitely hear 2 different styles of music. But we had some good reviews that came out, when they listened to Machines. But they said, even though these songs were written in the 90s, they still sound current, or they could be written current. They could be current in, listening to them now. You wouldn't know when they were written because, they're not specifically written enough where you go like, oh, that's automatically, from 1985 or whatever.
See, I love that you mentioned that because I talk about a lot too nowadays that it's so weird to me that songs in the 80s are so relevant today in 225, but all you'd have to do is change some of the names in it, you know? And like if those names maybe were left out back then, they would be more timeless. Like you take songs like that were about Reagan. You
Right.
could easily substitute Trump in there, in some of the songs.
Right.
Not that they're the same person or the same politician, but similar things, you know. So if you like kind of left the name out, kids today would be like, "Oh my God, how's that song about today? It was written back in the 80s."
Right. Well, the problem with the 80s, though, when you listen to a lot of 80s metal in particular, the production, right? The gated snare is a dead giveaway. And just, I don't know why they didn't record well in the 80s, because that was, for some reason, you listen to some 70s albums or you listen to Back in Black, you're like, oh my God, that album sounds so huge. Even like, Mutt Lange, also did High and Dry by Def Leppard. But some of the albums were so big sounding. And then the 80s came, and I don't know what the style of production happened. It went to garbage because you had all these compressed drums and terrible guitar sounds for the most part. I mean, there's some albums that stand out, but that 80s really suffered from production issues. And then the 2000s or late 90s, when they started brick walling everything and mastering, that's another time period you listen to and go like, that sounds like crap, because they brick wall mastered it because they thought it had to be as loud as possible with no dynamics. And I think people are getting away kind of from that now. So hopefully things will be more timeless.
I think kind of the reason is as somebody that was totally immersed in the 80s metal scene, like I was at Slayer and Metallica's first shows ever, and I think the way we were, and I think the bands were appealing to us, is all we wanted was loud, heavy, and fast, the heavier and the faster, and we didn't really give a crap about sound quality, at least the attendees, the teenagers. It's like, oh, there's some songs I listen to now that I absolutely love back then, and I still like them, but I'm like, oh, wow, that production is horrific, type of thing, but I think it was on purpose. Perfect example I like to bring up is Hetfield.
Mhm.
Okay. His voice. I love his original voice. He hates it. Because he says they play Seek and Destroy at the San Jose Sharks games. He goes, why don't they play the remastered one instead of the original one? I didn't even know how to sing then. I sucked. Now I know how to sing, type of thing. And then in reference what you're talking about, the Black Album, me and, the hardcore Metallica fans, like the 25 of us from the beginning, when that album came out, we were all like, posers, sellouts, fuck them, blah, blah, blah. But meanwhile, the reason Metallica is one of the biggest metal bands ever now is because of the production of that album, in my opinion.
The songs are good.
They are good. I love the songs, but the production value was so much better, to your point.
True. So I think we can thank Cliff passing away for the Black Album, because I don't think Cliff would have let them, become what they became, unfortunately.
No,
right?
He wouldn't have.
But you never know, right? In fact, on Reddit, I was just telling, I had an opinion that had Metallica not met Cliff and stayed on the Kill 'Em All kind of trajectory, they would have just been another Testament or another, Exodus.
Totally.
Right. Cliff made them what they were, what they became, because Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning are two different bands, right? There's no way you listen to those back to back and go, well, those are the same exact guys who wrote the album, because it's not. It's Cliff coming in and making them more melodic. But that was sort of, their shift. And I don't even think they keep calling them one of the big four. I don't even think they're a thrash band.
Not anymore, really. And I'm a total thrash metalhead, but
they're heavy metal band.
There's some thrash songs, but originally, it's funny because originally they were considered power metal, which makes me laugh too, because Kill 'Em All days was not power metal, but there was no such thing as thrash. But to your point, me and my friends, when Ride the Lightning came out, We always said if you took Fight Fire with Fire and brought it off of Ride the Lightning and put it on Kill 'Em All, and took Jump in the Fire off of Kill 'Em All and put it on Ride the Lightning, Kill 'Em All's the best band record ever. You know, and that's what we used to say back then. So that's to your point, because that's probably the least melodic of all the songs on Ride the Lightning.
Yeah.
And Jump in the Fire is the least thrashy of all the songs on Kill 'Em All.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And so I think you evolve as a musician like you have, you know, it's like, I was one of those people when I was young, but then you get older and realize, like, your favorite bands, you don't want them to stay garage bands, even though you think you do. Like, if you have respect for the musician, because the musician learns their craft more. And if you were playing in 2025 the exact same way you were in 1991, how much did you learn about your craft and how much did you evolve? That's why.
But it's a double-edged sword, because bands that we love, and Metallica is a great example. Who likes really anything after the Black Album? Yeah, Load and Reload. Yeah, they're okay, but then they had Saint Anger, and then they, you know, you don't listen, you don't go like, wow, I can't wait to hear them play a song off 72 Seasons or Hardwired for Self-Destruction, right? When
Except
you go
Hardwired, that's a thrash. That should be on Kill 'Em All.
Right, but I'm just saying in
song.
general,
Yeah.
there's a time period that your band has a shelf life, and you, whether it be because you were in high school during that time or you were in your 20s or whenever, there's always seems to be a cutoff that says your favorite band, if they have new material, it's probably not going to be as good, or you're not going to give it as the chance you should, even though it could be better. It could be way better than their first album, but because your life identified, like my life identified, up to the Black Album, right? And that's where I really like them. I mean, I think Death Magnetic was pretty good, and I still listen to that. But if you're going to give me a choice, of Death Magnetic and Ride the Lightning or Master of Puppets, I'm going to go back and listen to those. And that's what people want to hear live. So bands are in this weird situation in general, right?
Yeah.
Of course, I'm not in a band that's famous enough to be pigeonholed yet, and I probably never will be, because it's the reality of today's internet culture, and so many bands out there. But any band that comes out, they're just going to be stuck in a rut at some point. And I don't want to say they're going to be a nostalgia act, but people are going to hear you play the songs that they want to hear you play. They don't want to hear, oh, there's the new album, and it's take a piss break kind of songs that people will put that, like, oh yeah, I'm glad they played new songs so I could go use the bathroom, which is a sad thing, right? Because you're a fan, you should like everything or give it a chance. But sometimes people just like, I just want to see the first 3 albums and that's it.
It's so true, because to your point, even specifically with Metallica, like, I can listen to Kill 'Em All every day, no matter what, but other albums, like you said, past the Black Album, I like a couple songs on it, but I won't listen to the album per se on a regular. I'll listen to those songs, or like with 72 Seasons, which there's good songs on there. But when it first came out and they had that thing in the movie theaters, I decided to go, because like they're in my top 5 for, for 45 years, and I went to this thing where I was like, what, they played the whole album. And I was bored. Like, and for me to say I'm bored with Metallica, that says a lot. And it's not that there weren't good songs on there. It's not that same feeling like Whiplash gives you.
Well, because you're not 15 anymore, discovering it for the first time, right?
Exactly.
You're not a virgin anymore. There was a time when you had virginity to certain things, and then you lost it, and then you get kind of used to it, and you're like, well, this is still good, but it's not as good as I remember when you're still trying to chase the dragon and get that feeling again. But it's also them changing as well, where I don't think their thrashy stuff feels as organic. And for some reason, they have Metallica, they have the shittiest guitar tone, which I don't understand. It's so thin for some reason. I don't know why. Like, they got the best money production. You think the guitars are to be the best sounding metal guitars ever, like the Black Album guitar sound. And then I listen to it and go like, it doesn't sound, the guitars just don't, like, even the newer Judas Priest album, whatever, Shield, that was really good. It had a great guitar sound. And I'm like, just, you have the ability and the money to have that production that you want. And it just sounds meh when it comes to the guitar sound.
Yeah, it's weird too, right? Like, you would think, like you're saying, if they had all kinds of money to spend on it, that you would get the best production and the best sound ever.
They need Bob Rock back.
There you go. That's the key right there. And so tell us what else you got coming up. You got the album drop in November here. Well, the EP album. Right. I call everything albums.
Yeah.
And anything else moving forward that people have to look for you guys?
I think that's November 22nd. It comes out. There's going to be a video for Ill-Gotten Gains coming out that day, a lyric video. Another video is already in the can for, I can't even think of the song. One of the other songs is going to come out in December. Ever After. And then we're going to be shooting another video in December, which will probably come out in February. So we'll have like 4 videos from a 5-song EP. They're just fun to do. And, the 2 videos are Ill-Gotten Gains and Ever After are lyric kind of animated videos. That guy did a really good job. So, look out for those, and we just, it took us 2 years basically to find a permanent bass player. We had been using a fill-in guy for a while because we wanted to find the right permanent guy. And, the fill-in guy was too busy because he's in some other bands. And so, we played shows here and there, but about a couple months ago, we finally, and we haven't announced them yet. So pretty soon we're going to be taking pics next week in November. And we're going to be, finally officially posting welcome to the family to the new guy. So, and then we can start booking regularly. So hopefully in 2026, we'll be a lot busier. We had played like a handful of shows that came to me, and then the people reached out to me and said, "Hey, can you play the show?" And so we were able to do, probably 5 in the last 2 years, which isn't a lot, but again, we wanted to find the right bass player. It's when you're older, you just don't want a guy. You just don't want to hang out with a guy just because. You want to find somebody who gels. And we found a perfect guy, same age bracket, same background. Like he came in and it was like, oh, this guy's the guy. Right. So it works, and it makes it so much easier when somebody has a similar background and similar thought processes to work in. And ironically, he's learned all the songs the way they were originally played on the album. And I'm like, oh my God, I haven't heard that bass line like that since I wrote it and recorded it, because he's taken the time to actually learn the material.
Nice.
I give bass players leeway. Like, hey, just play, just play what you want as long as it's the root notes. And he took the time to actually learn some of the more intricate stuff. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. So yeah, so that's kind of what's coming up, right? New EP, new video. I mean, release of the EP, new videos. Probably see us playing out more. So that's our goal.
There you go. Well, I hope I see you at the DWP festivals in 2026. Okay.
I don't know what those are, but I hope we see you too.
They're the big US ones.
Oh, okay. Well, is that the production company?
That's DWP, Danny Wimmer. He does Aftershock, Louder Than Life, Incarceration, Sonic Temple, Welcome to Rockville.
Oh, okay. Well, we probably won't see you there, but unless we're playing at 2 p.m. on the Wednesday before it starts on Friday or something. We're realistic.
You never know. We've had bands that have played at these festivals that actually crashed, like the Old School Punk thing, crashed the festival and played in the parking lot. And then Wimmer saw him, and instead of kicking him out, he put him on stage the next day.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so you never know. So I'm putting a vibe out there for you.
Okay, I'm accepting it.
There you go. Well, tell everybody how they can reach out to you guys on the internet, on socials, get the new album when it drops, all that good stuff.
Well, I mean, it's going to be in all the regular places, right? Spotify, any streaming service. It's going to be everywhere, wherever you get your music. As far as getting a hold of us, it's Aittala, Aittala. I mean, hopefully you'll have some links with this. but really, we're Aittala Music on, the big ones like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, if anybody uses Facebook anymore. But so it's Aittala Music is our username. And if you go to aittala.com, you'll find our website, even though I don't keep it up to date as much, but you can find their basic links off there. So
Cool.
the usual places that people can easily find us, but make sure you spell it right. Cause if you misspell it a little bit, it's going to redirect you to Aittala, which
I was going to just say that was the one that went in my head.
well, and that's what we get mixed up with Aittala. And actually, if you go to Metal Sucks and look at their archives, they did a story about Aittala versus Aittala, and their conclusion was both bands sucked equally. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll accept that.
Wow, that's funny. Well, see, now you should do a tour, like contact Franz and do a tour with both bands.
Well, they are a lot different, and they've definitely changed their sound over the years too. So I was surprised that they're still around, but I think they're more of an electronic death metal band now. They don't seem to have as many people in the band anymore. But we digress. We want to still talk about Aittala as we're closing this out.
No doubt. So, Aittala, get the album, or you can't listen to my show.
Exactly. He's gonna hold you hostage.
That's right. Well, thanks a lot for making us great music, and thanks for being on the Adventures of Pipeman.
Well, thanks, Pipeman. Appreciate it. Hope to be back.
Thank you for listening to the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY Radio.